If you ever visit the Marjory Perry Nature Preserve, you will find a hidden treasure tucked away in the heart of rural Greenwood Village. Every day, this natural area provides an opportunity for park and trail users to free their mind and spirit amongst the backdrop of some breathtaking scenic landscapes. The land where the Marjory Perry Nature Preserve lies has an interesting story traced back to an outdoorswoman and conservationist who is fondly remembered as the lover of the land and of its innocent creatures. Marjorie Perry was born in 1883 in Chicago to Samuel and Lottie Perry and moved to Denver in 1886. Her love for the outdoors began at a young age when she started taking long hunting trips and horseback excursions with her father.
She loved to hunt with her father and my father, her brother. They went bear hunting many, many times. Elk, not as much, and deer only for eating. But she belonged to a duck club for many years and would go Wednesday afternoon and Saturday afternoon to shoot ducks out at Bar Lake. At an early age, probably around 12 or 14, she spent summers in Nebraska at a farm that her family had owned. And that's where she began her love of cattle, horses, ducks, geese, every wildlife imaginable. And she always believed in having her own vegetable garden, both in Denver and in Steamboat in the summer, because she lived off the land wherever she could. I would call her one of the earliest environmentalists in Colorado.
For Marjorie, Steamboat Springs became her second home, where she lived for part of the year. She always traveled on her favorite horse with a wonderful hair-braided bridle and reins, enjoying every journey.
In 1920, she ended up building a cabin there and spent her summers always in Steamboat. At one point, she would take her two horses and ride from Denver to Steamboat. And my brother rode with her. It was about a 7-day trip, and they would ride in all kinds of weather. They would find at night, she would look for a good barn, and then she would go up to the house and say, could she leave her horses in the barn for the night? And they would say, well, what are you going to do? And she would say, well, I'll sleep in the barn unless you ask me in. And most of the times they asked her into the house, and she left her horses in the barn.
Hailed as one of Colorado's first women skiers, Marjorie's passion for the winter sport began when she met Carl Howelson, a Norwegian traveling with a group of men giving ski jumping exhibitions. Carl organized the first Steamboat Springs Winter Carnival in 1914, and Marjorie's role as a Colorado ski pioneer received special recognition.
Skiing was a real passion of hers, and she started skiing in about 1910. When Marjorie began skiing, you had very long skis, and you reached up as far as you could reach your hand, and usually they added 2 more inches to those skis, and people didn't know how to turn. But she learned from the Norwegians to put the poles between her legs, and she would sit back there and use that as a lever, and then she could ski through the trees. Marjorie would mostly do her skiing cross-country. She didn't take up jumping with the Norwegians. She was inducted into the Ski Hall of Fame a few years after she had died, and they acknowledged her part in the early days of skiing in Colorado.
Marjorie Perry's way of living was not a formal career, but from a life living off the land. She was often teased by her sister Charlotte that Marjorie could have made something of herself if she had any ambition. Marjorie joked that she did have ambition. She wanted a cow. So, in 1939, she purchased some land off the Greenwood Ranch along Colorado Boulevard, Holly Street, Orchard Road, and Bellevue Avenue, and began farming.
Fortunately for Marjorie, she did not have to work. My grandfather had done very well in business, and he did not like his family, his daughters particularly, to have to work. She always had wanted a farm, and when her grandmother, my grandmother died, she moved it then from Grant Street and began looking for land where she could have a farm. And she settled in Greenwood Village. She ended up finding land off of Bellevue, which was completely rural at the time, and found a friend who went in with her on buying up different parts of land. I think she originally bought about 60 acres, and then the friend and she together bought what would be the corner of Bellevue and Holly. Greenwood Village was being formed, and they came to Marjorie and wanted her to join the village. She had enough land so they could not take it from her, and they said, "We may have a cemetery next to you." And she replied, "I'd rather have the dead ones than the live ones." So she wanted to keep her own privacy and her own rural area. Then on the farm, she began raising cows and eggs or chickens, and then began selling very thick unpasteurized cream and fresh eggs to quite a few people. She was a very conservative, saving person who felt that all things should be used to the fullest extent. So when she had pet dogs that died, she would have them skinned and use them as rugs in her house. She had a couple of pet horses skinned, and we used to use them as lap robes in an open-air touring car when we went skiing up on Lookout Mountain.
Marjorie Perry died in 1969 at the age of 86. 210 acres of her land she called the Preserve was developed into residential neighborhoods, and today, 59 acres is preserved as open space by the village. Although Marjorie Perry's life can only be learned about in historic articles or told through stories by her family heirs, her nephew Ken says that she would be very proud of how her land is being used today, as it reflects who Marjorie Perry really was.
I think Marjorie would be very happy with the compromise that was reached, keeping the horseshoe open. That was her favorite part of the land, and she loved to skate on the ponds. She loved the fact that the ducks and geese would nest there, and I think she would be very pleased that that part had been kept open and named as a park in her memory. In her writings to us, she was very poetic about the wind and the leaves and the change of seasons. Outdoors was her world.